Good morning, students. Let us continue with the lesson population and pick up from where we have left. Now, let us begin with the topic density of population. Now, what do you mean by the term density of population? It means the number of people per unit area of land. It is usually expressed as the number of persons in every square kilometer of land. But when we talk about the density of the world's population, it means that if all the people in the world were to spread out uniformly over its land area, then there would be about 50 people in every square kilometer. But this is not the ground reality. There are several anomalies, such as, now take the case of a small country, Monaco. It is having 48,000 people per square mile. Now, mile means about 1.6 kilometer. That means there are 48,000 people per 1.6 kilometer. Now, a small country may have a very high density of population. Look at Monaco, south of France, just to the south of France, and it is having a monarchy, a country where the king is the real ruler. Now, this is a very small country and it has a very high density of population. Even though the population is not very large, but still, what do we find? That people are packed into a small area. Now, on the contrary, we have Mongolia, which is having only 5 people per square kilometer. Now look, it's a very big country, but it is having only 5 people per square kilometer. So the density of the population keeps on varying from place to place. Now, among the continents, we find that Asia has the highest density of population, while Australia has the lowest density of population. Actually, Antarctica has the lowest density of population, but it has been excluded since it does not have a permanent population. Now, the density of population also varies from place to place in the same continent. For example, large cities will have a very high density of population. Similarly, coastal areas too will have a very high density of population. River basins, this is a picture of Varanasi, that is along the river Ganga. Here also we find a very high density of population. Can you recognize this city? It's our own city, Patna. That also has a very high density of population because it is located along the banks of a very mighty river, that is Ganga. However, deserts, mountainous regions, and forests have a very sparse population. Now, some of the smallest countries in the world, like Singapore, Bahrain, the Vatican City, have the highest densities of population. They are very small countries, but they have a very high density of population, as I have already told you earlier, that in such countries the population might not be very large, but the people are packed in a very small area. Some countries with large populations also have got a very high density of population, like Bangladesh, Taiwan, South Korea, Netherlands, and our country, India, are the best examples where the population is large and the density of the population is also very high. Among permanently inhabited territories of the island of Greenland, a territory which is a territory of Denmark, has the lowest population density. So, the island of Greenland is very large, but it has got the lowest density of population. Look at the map over here, how big the island is. But in spite of it being very big, the density of population is very, very less. Now let us learn another aspect of population, and that is the change in population size. Now, the change in population size refers to how the population, that is the number of people, keeps on changing. And every 10 years, all countries, most of the countries, undergo a census where an official counting of the population is being done. And it is done periodically to show the changes in the population size. At present, the world population is about 7.8 billion, and the population has grown to this size over a long period of time. Changes in the size of population depends upon the birth rate and the death rate. The number of people or the number of live births, please remember to use the word live. The number of live births per 1,000 people in a year is called the birth rate, while the number of deaths per 1,000 people in a year is called the death rate. The difference between these two rates, that is the birth rate and the death rate, gives the natural increase of the population growth. Now, the population of the region can also change due to migration. So, members of a population may leave the area and they might enter another country. We call them immigrants, that is, people who are entering another country. And those people who are leaving that country, we call them emigrants. Now, this migration or movement of people keeps on occurring not only from one country to another, but also in the same country from rural to urban areas. Now, that also tends to give a different census of the number of people living in that particular region. Now, let's see how. Now, when the number of immigrants, that is, people who are entering, exceeds the number of emigrants, that is, people who are leaving the country's population begins to increase. So, more people are entering while less people are moving out. So, it is very likely that the population of that country will begin to increase. However, when emigration exceeds immigration, the population of the country is likely to decrease. Generally, people migrate to places where they can get better food and also better resources. So, we find that many people move from countries like Bangladesh, India, Sudan, or even the countries of Africa to places where they get better employment opportunities like USA and Australia. So many people emigrate to countries like Australia and USA. Now, if you look at the table which is given at the bottom of the page 15, you will find a statistics given of the growth of the world population. Now, if you look at the statistics, you will find that we were about 1 billion in the year 1800. So, this is y-axis on which the population is being mentioned, and the x-axis where the year is being mentioned. So, here we are having the point 1, that is 1 billion. So, in the year 1800, we were about 1 billion people. It took nearly 127 years for this 1 billion to become 2 billion. Look, here we have the 2 billion mark. You can see over here 2, and we have the 2 billion mark. From here, we find that this gradual increase of the population became pretty rapid. That is, in only 33 years, we crossed the 3 billion mark. We will be here, and draw a straight line, then find that there is a rapid increase in the population. And after 1960, we find that the steepness of this graph has increased. And as a result, there has been a very fast increase in the population. And now we have reached the point where we are 7.8 billion. The number of people living on the earth is 7.8 billion. This is the year 2000, might be over here, 2020. We have reached the point where we are having a population of about 7.8 billion. This graph also tells us another very important aspect, that is developing regions and developed regions. So the developed regions have not increased the population to as greatly as that of the developing region. Now, what is the reason behind all this? Initially, the population of the world grew very slowly. You can see over here, it grew very, very slowly. You can see over here how it grew very slowly. But as both the birth rate and the death rate were very high during that time, that is why we were having a very slow growth of population, because both birth rate and death rate were high. But with the passage of time, especially after the Industrial Revolution, the conditions of living improved due to better medical facilities and better and higher production of food. Now that brought down the death rate, which used to be caused by diseases and starvation. So the death rate declined and the population began to grow faster. So you can see over here that the Industrial Revolution took place during this time, is in the middle of the 19th century, and as the Industrial Revolution occurred, better medicines also started to be made available. So this gradual increase in the world population has become faster with time. Now, the rise in the growth rate of the population led to a number of problems, including the shortage of food. There's a very fast increase in the growth rate of the population, and it has become pretty clear that with the limited resources which we are having, the earth is not able to produce the amount of food which we require. So efforts are now being made to keep the birth rate in control, to ensure that there is enough food for everyone. Now the resultant fall in the birth rate has lowered the rate of the population growth. Now the rate of population growth varies with time and is different in different parts of the world. The developed countries experienced a high rate of population growth when they succeeded in lowering the death rate. Later on, these countries succeeded in lowering the birth rate also, thus slowing down the growth of the population. So, countries like USA, Canada, the West European countries, they experienced a high rate of population growth earlier in the initial period, but they were able to bring down this birth rate and slow down the growth of population. Now, the facilities required for lowering the death rate reached the relatively less developed countries later. These countries have managed to reduce the death rate substantially, but continue to have a very high birth rate. This is mainly because people in these countries are not very aware of the need to control the population growth. At present, we find that Africa, Asia, South America, and Australia are experiencing a very high rate of growth of population than Europe and North America. So, this map, which is being displayed on your screen, shows the annual growth rate percentage. And what do we find? That these continents, starting from South America, Australia, large areas of Africa, Asia, they are experiencing a very high rate of growth of population, while these countries like Canada, USA, most of the West European countries have a comparatively very low growth of population. So, we are learning how to have a balance between the resources which we are having on the earth and how can these resources be more or less equally be divided among the people of the world. But we should also pay attention to this aspect that the resources of the earth are limited. So, we have to keep the population also limited in order to ensure that everyone gets a minimum amount of resource present on the earth. So, that is what we have enough time for today. Thank you.